Today, we are all about Google search. But first up, let's give you some interesting stats about search. Did you know that 73% of paid search market share belongs to Google? This essentially means they are the largest search engine on the planet, and we should all be advertising on it. 50% of users can't tell the difference between an ad and an organic result. Between $9,000 and $10,000 is the average monthly spend for small to medium enterprises, and 51% of searches are longer than 4 words. These last two stats in particular are good to bear in mind when it comes to thinking about budgets as well as the keywords that you target. I am sure you all know by now that you can ask Morpheus questions at any point during the lesson. If he gives a bit of a strange response, or you just have any queries around that, or any technical issues, please email support@shoreacademy.com. And of course, any course content queries can go to marketing@shoreacademy.com. Now, before we jump into lesson 6, let's just recap what we learned in lesson 5. We were prepping for a Facebook campaign, which was pulling together your objectives, budget, creative assets, targeting, naming conventions, and all other requirements. We then moved on to actually creating the campaign within the Business Manager and duplicating ad sets and ads within the same campaign. And finally, just a bit of a navigation of the Business Manager, specifically moving between different levels of a campaign, and a quick look at the features of Facebook's Creative Hub. Today, we are going to go through the steps that it takes to properly plan a search campaign. Specifically, we'll see all the requirements for a search campaign, but we'll take a closer look at quality score and ad rank before moving on to bidding and non-keyword targeting in a bit more detail. But the bulk of the lesson will be around keyword research and Google's keyword planner, before finally we look at preparing some ad copy and what needs to be planned for, created to do those ads. Now, in lessons 1 and 7 of Module 1, we looked at Google Ads as a whole, the campaign types and targeting options available, and you also learned about the bidding strategies, match types, and ad policies. But there is a lot more to Google Ads, and being able to use this platform is honestly one of the most in-demand skill sets in the marketing industry at the moment. So I hope you're prepared and looking forward to this, and let's go through what we need for a campaign. You will have determined or been told the objective or objectives of your search campaign. The examples here are common objectives, but of course there are others. But we're looking here at sales, leads, traffic, or return on ad spend. You will have decided on or been given landing pages to use for your campaign. What is a good idea to do is to check the different URLs on different devices, just to pick up if you can see any errors or any usability issues. It does happen, and there are of course teams in place in general to check this kind of thing, but a fresh pair of eyes is always helpful. Also submit a test lead or add to cart, or whatever the conversion is that you're going to be tracking for this search campaign. Test that whole process to make sure there aren't any problems. Essentially, we need to make it as easy as possible for someone to convert. So highlighting any errors will help that in the long run. Then, of course, good idea to note the keywords that are used on the landing page if you didn't have anything to do with the creation of them. This will help you when it comes to your keyword targeting as well as your ad creation. And then finally, if you're using UTMs to track performance of the campaign, create those and keep them in a doc so that you always have them handy. Then, of course, you need to know your campaign dates and whether it's an always-on campaign or for a limited time. Now, when it comes to deciding the length of a campaign, if you have a say in it or you are the one doing it, it should be based, of course, on your objectives, along with whether those objectives fall in your short, mid, or long-term goals. It also depends on the value of search for your business and the percentage of marketing spend allocated to it. Of course, you're not going to be creating a comprehensive strategy around search campaigns for the year if you have a very limited budget. Then the next determining factor would be your keywords. And questions to ask yourself really are your performing keywords in a competitive space? And do they need to be protected? The thing is that you won't receive the same results if you're dropping in and out of the auction all the time. So if your campaign is enabled and then paused and etc. If a keyword is valuable to you, then you need to spend time nurturing it. And more on that a bit later, but it ties into ad rank and quality score. Then, of course, are the keywords relevant to your brand all the time or only for certain periods? Are you targeting sales keywords now, for example? You won't necessarily want to target them all the time. And then, of course, your budget. That is a big factor. You can't, let's say, have a budget of $5,000 for the year and expect meaningful results. Of course, everyone needs to test whether a search campaign can perform for them, but that means giving it adequate time, which is at least a month, and also adequate budget. So it might be an initial outlay in the beginning, something that you're unsure of, you don't know what's actually going to happen. But at the end of the day, that's what you need to do to see if what happens on search, the test that you do, can perform or give your company the performance that you're looking for. Campaigns that have no end date are referred to as always on. So examples of those would be brand campaigns, for example. You're always bidding on your own keywords. Or continuously targeting site visitors, so remarketing with different products. And of course, there's many, many more options depending on the business. We will be looking at this in more detail later in this lesson, but to help you determine the best keywords to target, you need to do something called keyword research and use a tool like the Keyword Planner. Likewise, you need a list of keywords that you don't want your ads to appear for, and that's called your list of negatives. Then, apart from keyword targeting, you need to know your other targeting, such as your device, gender, remarketing lists if you have any, your location. Again, more on this a little bit later. And then you may or may not be responsible for ensuring that your tracking is set up and working correctly. You also need to prep your ad copy, and we'll do more on that later, and then determine your bid strategy as well as your attribution model. I said this in the last lesson on building a Facebook campaign. Preparation is the first step to successful performance. Now, it seems like there is a lot required for a search campaign, and honestly, there is. It is competitive and it is expensive. And as much as I would love to say that it's as easy as Google's ads tell us it is, it can take a lot of time and effort. And let's be honest, if we could all make it big with online advertising, then we would all be making it big. Just a quick question to jumpstart that brain if it's not there already. For which objective would a search campaign not be best for? Pop your answer into Morpheus. Is it A, leads, B, branding, C, sales, or D, awareness? The answer is B, branding. People are searching the brands that they know. Therefore, search is not the best or the first platform to choose. It should obviously assist the main campaigns, and of course you would have a brand campaign in place if you were deciding to bid on your brand keywords. But when it comes to the actual objective of branding, of mass awareness, of reputation, of all those kinds of objectives that fall within that, search is not the platform to start off with. If we were talking Google Ads in general, then of course we've got YouTube, we've got display, there are multiple options that would definitely suit a branding objective. But in this case, search is not ideal. Before you decide on the structure of your ad groups, you need to understand the components of quality score and ad rank. Now, starting with ad rank, your ad rank determines whether your ad is eligible to appear on the search results, and if so, at what position. I must add that the average position metric was taken away, and it's been replaced with something called absolute top impression rate and top impression rate. More on this in the next lesson. But your ads still appear in different positions. We're just not able to see the average position anymore. There are 6 components to ad rank. In no particular order, they are thresholds. Due to the number of advertisers on the network and the need for quality ads, Google implements a minimum threshold that an ad must achieve in order for it to be eligible in the auction. It's a score of 100, and of course the overall ad rank, including the quality score, is what contributes to this, as well as other things in your account like good practices and good payments and all of that. So let's say if the threshold for the top spot in an auction is 60, then any ads below this are automatically disqualified from that auction. Now, this makes a lot of sense because there aren't just a few advertisers vying for those same spots that you are in an auction. There are hundreds, possibly thousands. So, of course, Google needs a way to kind of bring up the higher quality ads and ensure that the lower quality ads aren't given a chance, and hopefully the account owners will then improve them. Then there is quality score, and this is related to your keywords, ads, and landing page. More on this just now. And your bid is obviously a factor as well. Your bid is essentially, it's saying to Google, this is the maximum I'm willing to pay per click. And that would have an effect on where you would rank. Then we have something called the impact of your ads. And the expected impact of your ads and the extensions you have is a consideration in ad rank. It's based on historical and existing performance of your account, so it does take time to accrue. It should improve over time. Then there's the user context, so from the perspective of your potential client or customer. This is where Google looks at the specific keywords that person searched for, the device that they searched on, as well as a user's location and any other factors that Google are aware of, from their tracking. Then, of course, this would be in here, competitiveness. Some auctions are more competitive than others. Accounts with similar ad ranks will have similar opportunities to win a position in an auction. I can't get any more detailed than that because we actually don't know all the factors that Google uses. It's not unusual. That's the same for any kind of search engine marketing that you're doing. You can't know everything. But if an account has a much higher ad rank than the other competitors in the auction, it is more likely to win, but may do so at a higher cost. So that is the benefit, or the payoff of having a higher ad rank, is you do rank higher and you win the auction. But because of the competitiveness of the auction and how many advertisers there were, you're going to potentially pay more. Moving on to quality score. Now, this is a component of ad rank that you have some control over. The other factors can, of course, be improved with best practices and strategic changes, but you can't really control all of it. Achieving higher quality scores can decrease CPCs, though, and any decrease in costs, particularly in a competitive environment, is highly sought after. So your keywords are given a quality score from 1 to 10. And it is given based on 3 factors. There is ad relevance, expected CTR, and landing page experience. We'll go through all of these now, starting with ad relevance, and that is referring to how closely your keyword is related to your ad copy. For generic terms, so terms that are not brand, so either a competitor or your own brand, there should be no issue with close matches, so making the keyword match the ad copy. But you can't exactly add competitor brand names to your ad copy. So quality score will always be lower for those kinds of terms. It is also referring to how closely your keywords are related to your landing page. Some businesses go so far as to create different landing pages for each of their top performing terms. Sometimes changing them quite extensively, but often just changing the keyword on the page. For example, changing the heading. So everything else is exactly the same, except for the heading. Expected CTR tries to determine the performance and relevancy of your ads against competitors who appeared with you, as well as your past performance in your account. It looks at things like whether your ad or their ad fared better than yours in the same position for the same search term. Does your ad see a much higher CTR in a higher position? If you get a below average score, then it should be a signal for you to change your ad copy. And generally, the more competitive an environment is, the more frequently you need to make those ad copy changes. Then finally, we have landing page experience, which is something that may or may not be within your control. But essentially what it needs to be is user-friendly. So how do people experience your landing page? Is conversion rate good? Is bounce rate low? Is the code clean? Is it mobile friendly? All those kinds of things are considered when it comes to landing page experience. Of course, as I mentioned, the text needs to be related to the search terms wherever possible. And if this overall score is low, then it does impact your quality score and therefore increases your CPCs. There are many different opinions on which ad group structure is best. I wouldn't say there's only one correct answer, so to speak, but we will actually be talking more on ad group structures in lesson 6 and 7 of module 3 when we talk about optimization and analysis. But there are some best practice recommendations from Google, which includes having tightly themed ad groups with no more than 20 keywords per ad group, and also that you should include at least 3 ads per ad group and at least 1 keyword in each ad. Let's see what you think of this one. Please tell me, how much more will you pay than your nearest competitor in the auction? Is it A, 10 cents, B, 1 cent, C, $1, or D, 50 cents? Pop your answer into Morpheus, A, B, C, or D, and the answer is B, 1 cent. This is not taking all the factors into consideration, but just to demonstrate, let's say that your nearest competitor has set a maximum CPC of $2. You've set a maximum CPC for the same keyword of $2.50. The auction determines that you will appear above this competitor, but you won't pay $2.50 for the position. You will pay $2.01, just 1 cent above the bid of the nearest competitor to you. Also, a very important decision is which bid strategy are you going to use and how should credit for conversions be assigned. We're not going to spend time on attribution now, but I do want to touch on bidding and just give you a few recommendations based on experience. These bidding options are what I believe to be the safest bet when launching a new campaign in a new account. First, there is manual bidding. So it's completely manual, no automation involved. You set your CPCs and you control them, and if you want them to change, you have to change them yourself. Or you can set something called eCPC, which is enhanced CPC, and this strategy increases your bid in the auction when there is someone more likely to perform your desired conversion, meaning you achieve a higher position or just appear in the auction and have a higher chance of being seen and clicked. With eCPC, Google can actually go above the maximum CPC that you've set, but only in those circumstances where it believes it can get you that conversion. One of the main reasons I recommend these two above others in the beginning is that there is less chance of overspending or spending your budget too quickly or bidding too highly, as there are constraints to work within. Some strategies to be wary of would be maximize conversions and maximize clicks. The reason I say this is because these strategies signal Google to pay no mind to cost and to just get you as many clicks or conversions as possible. Of course, you have your budget, so it's not going to go over that, but there's no maximum bid that it's sitting with. For example, something that I have seen in the maximize clicks bid strategy is that it then looks for clicks in the early hours of the morning when everything is a lot cheaper. So of course you get a lot more clicks, but the quality of the traffic is generally lower. Or with maximize conversions, it could result in you paying for a very expensive keyword that your budget couldn't consistently allow. And of course there are ways to manage this effectively, and I'm not saying these are terrible strategies, but they just shouldn't be the first choice, in my opinion, for a new account. With target CPA, you set a target and Google tries to give you the results as close as possible to this. It could be a good strategy to try from the beginning if you're confident in the performance of your offering and your planning. I have mentioned potential problems with this before. For example, if you bid too high and you're paying too much where you actually could be paying less, or you bid too low and your campaign won't receive any volume, when in reality you could be achieving the CPA that you want with just a slightly higher target. However, this kind of information really only comes when you've actually spent time in the accounts and you have a bit of experience. Moving on to device, the questions that you need to ask yourself would be, do you want to bid higher on a certain device, for example, mobile? Do you want to exclude a device completely? Do you want to maybe have separate campaigns based on the target device? So, for example, one campaign targeting mobile only and another targeting desktop. There are good reasons for doing that. Not always necessary, but there are good reasons for it. And of course, answers to these questions would come in knowing your target audience and being strategic with your budget, and of course, knowing your performance marketing objective and what you actually need to achieve. And something very good to be aware of is that in or within Google Ads, the biggest targeting group in the gender and age categories are actually what we call, or what they call, unknowns. So they don't know the gender and they don't know the age of these people. Now, this might only be something that crops up for specific businesses, with very specific gender and age targeting. But the solution to that is to try and target differently. So don't target your desired gender or age, rather exclude the known gender and ages from your targeting. Sounds a bit confusing, but just to make it make sense, if you're a women's company, rather exclude the known men from your campaign as opposed to targeting just women and then potentially leaving those unknowns out. Likewise, with age, if you are only targeting people below 30, then you should exclude all the other age groups except, of course, the unknown. So yes, you might be targeting people who are not your required gender or age, but rather that than missing out on the bulk of people that you could actually be reaching. If you don't have your remarketing lists set up, then now is the time to set them up and decide where they will be included or excluded in your campaign. Even if they aren't ready yet, it's a good idea to set them up. I've said this before, because then they will have time to accrue, to gain volume, to reach that minimum threshold for them to start showing or start being used within Google Ads. You have your remarketing, similar, and custom audiences. We spoke about these in Module 1. If you have a new account, then you won't yet have access to the similar and custom audiences, but you do have access to remarketing. These audience lists can be added or excluded at the campaign and ad group level. And there are various reasons for this. For example, you might want your entire campaign to target your existing site visitors, but you might want only a specific ad group with certain terms to appear to people who have converted within the last 30 days. Lots of different strategies. We've talked about this before, but yes, we could come up with hundreds and hundreds of different ones. Keyword research, here we are. This is arguably the most important factor in planning a search campaign. There are many tools out there, some that are free and more that aren't, but I'll be using or showing you the Google Ads Keyword Planner. There is a bit more work to do before we look at the tool, and I want to tell you about something called intent. People search in many different ways, depending on which stage of the cycle that they are in. Add to that the billions of search queries every day and the unique ways in which people use and understand words in general. There's no way that we can say that everyone who searches in a certain manner or, with certain words is in that exact stage of the cycle. But at the very least, there are some common patterns. By intent, we mean people who intend to buy your product or service. So it's not including more upper funnel objectives like traffic to site or reach. It's very performance focused. So if we take the AIDA funnel, for example, it would be the desire and action stage of the funnel, potentially not even the desire, just the action. With the VAC model that we made up in Module 1, it would just only be these high intent keywords, so people who are actively searching to buy something now. Low intent keywords are keywords used for purposes other than making a transaction. They typically include words like what is, what do, and how to, though how to could be a high intent term in some cases. If someone is searching an exact brand name, for example, just Adidas or Adidas website, then their intent towards other brands is very low. They're being very specific. They know exactly what they're looking for. But non-brand broad keywords like couches or vacuum cleaners signal someone is in the very early stages of the buying cycle. And in a performance-focused search campaign, they aren't the kind of terms that we would then be targeting. These terms are what is called navigational or informational queries. Then high-intent keywords typically include terms like get a quote, contact details, sale, buy, book, free delivery, discount, and very specific searches like a 3-seater black suede Madison couch. There'd be many more examples when going industry specific, coupled with the unique facets of the business and the strictness of their performance marketing objective, but is also something that you will really only discover along with your keyword planning and your research. But once the campaign is running, you will find additional keywords that you didn't realize, were part or that showed this high intent that people are converting quite well on. Another question for you. Please tell me, true or false, Google Ads will not go over your daily budget. Is it A, true, or B, false? Please pop your answer into Morpheus. The answer is B, false. Google will sometimes go over your daily budget, but it will not spend more than your total budget for a campaign, providing you've calculated it correctly. And it's only really a potential issue if you're using daily budget as opposed to the lifetime budget. But essentially, yes, you will see a different or varied spend if you look on a daily basis on your accounts and you're using a daily budget. Sometimes it'll go over, but sometimes it'll spend less. And essentially, by the time the campaign is finished, Google will ensure that it hasn't overspent. It will just spend the total amount that you have calculated. We will spend a bit more time on this in the next lesson, but just back to intent quickly. There are, of course, certain searches that you want to avoid completely. There are commonly used words which the average business does not want their ads to appear for, as well as more industry-specific terms, of course. Your list of these words is what is called your negatives, and negatives can be applied at the account, campaign, and ad set level, or ad group level. And there are good uses for each of those levels. Some examples of the common terms added as negatives. We have cancel, cancellation or refund, PDF, template, news, school, student, exam and paper. Comes up a lot, student. Complaint, issues and support. And then as